Compass and Clock. I'm your host, Mary Copeland. This infotainment podcast explores how to live your best life now and well into retirement. We'll discuss topics in financial planning, housing, and insurance. We'll talk wellness, relationships, and leisure activities. A full active life requires planning for your goals and preparing for the unexpected. I'll introduce you to a variety of guests, from knowledgeable experts to folks sharing stories of their life experiences and so much more, because life is big. All is intended to help guide you in planning for what you need now and at any age. Like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Today, my guest is Nicci Noteboom, the Marketing and Communication Director for the Alzheimer's Association Washington State chapter since 2022. Nicci has a seasoned background, I should say, in healthcare and social service, marketing and communications, including working with seniors and underserved populations. Nicci, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me. Thanks for, giving us a warm welcome at the association. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I hold the Alzheimer's Association near and dear to my heart. They are a tremendous organization, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today because we are going to talk about not only the Alzheimer's Association and all that it can provide for those folks that need their services and support, but we're going to talk about the walk too. Everybody hears about the walk, so I figured maybe we should explain what it is. So
it's coming up fast. So yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just jump right into my first question, which for all our listeners out there, I want them to know, what is Alzheimer's disease and when was it first discovered? Because you just hear Alzheimer's fall off of everybody's lips these days.
You bet. You bet. So Alzheimer's is a progressive and fatal brain disorder that impacts a person's memory, thinking, and behavior. And it is a type of dementia. I think that's a lot of times where we all kind of slip up. Is Alzheimer's dementia? Is dementia Alzheimer's? Think of dementia as an umbrella. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There's also vascular dementia. Folks with Parkinson's can develop dementia. There's also frontal temporal dementia, which has been in the news a lot lately because of Bruce Willis. And Alzheimer's was first discovered around 1906 by a doctor named Dr. Alzheimer, who was a German physician who worked with people that were struggling with, just like what I said, these cognitive memory issues. And when a particular woman passed, somehow, some way, he was given access to do an autopsy on her and discovered sort of these shrinkage within the brain and what we refer to now as plaques around the nerve endings. And that is sort of how, for lack of a better term, the ball got rolling in the name of the disease and then also research. So for a very long time, the only way to really know if someone had Alzheimer's was at autopsy and looking at the brain.
And what year again was that?
1906.
So, okay. So we're talking about 125 years ago almost.
Yeah. And not a lot, things happening between then and the 60s, but it wasn't really till the late 60s where there was sort of a cognitive assessment that was developed by different physicians to be like, this is what we can look at for somebody's baseline. And then sort of go with, is this somebody who has a type of dementia? And then later on, first drug wasn't approved for dementia symptoms, for Alzheimer's symptoms, until, the early 90s. I think the first drug trial was the 80s, but the first drug for symptoms wasn't approved by the FDA until the 90s. And it really wasn't until 2 years ago that we had a drug that was approved to treat the actual kind of what we believe are the root causes of the disease and to slow it down for people early on in mild cognitive impairment. So long ways still to go.
Right. It's in its infancy for research and development and breakthrough for cures.
Yeah.
Okay. So you hear, like I said, Alzheimer's falling off of people's lips all the time. Do you have any kind of statistics locally and nationwide maybe that you can provide us?
You bet. You bet. The association every year does a report called Facts and Figures that comes out around March. So I really encourage people to Google Alzheimer's Facts and Figures. Every year, that report has sort of a special report embedded in it. One year it was about sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really, highlighted how some communities are still very underserved by research and even access to being diagnosed. But in general, some statistics that I think are, pretty powerful is right now in the US, we have 6 million people living with the disease, and that's expected to jump to 13 million by 2050. The lifetime risk for a person if they're 45 is 1 in 5 women, 1 in 10 men are at a lifetime risk from age 45 on of developing the disease. And then here in Washington, just to get a little bit more granular, we have 120,000 people living with the disease and 300,000 unpaid caregivers. And so by unpaid caregivers, kind of get rid of the jargon, that's basically family and friends who are caretaking for their loved one. And 1 in 3 seniors dies of Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. So that's really more than breast cancer or prostate cancer.
Those numbers are insane.
Yeah, it's tough. It's just tough. And we also know that we don't have enough healthcare workers to take care of sort of this growing population. A stat that we had from the report this year was there going to be a need of 1.2 million additional direct care workers needed to be able to take care of what we see down the horizon. So
yeah, that's a whole nother topic. I want
that is a whole nother topic. That's a roundtable, probably. Yeah. That's a roundtable.
We'll focus on Alzheimer's right now. So
yeah.
When and why was the Alzheimer's Association founded, and was it nationwide then? And if so, then when did the states start their own chapters? Because there's, like you said, there's a umbrella, and then there's the subsidiaries.
Yeah, so the association was started in 1980 by a gentleman named Jerome Stone, and Jerome's wife was on her path with disease starting in the 70s. And during their journey, he found that there wasn't a lot of research happening, or at least research that, you and I and the general public would know about. Wasn't a lot of funding for research. Wasn't a lot of, even in some ways more important than research for those of us that have had a loved one with the disease, is not a lot of support for caregivers, right? Not a lot of support for the patients, the people living with the disease. So himself, along with some other philanthropists, caregivers, providers, healthcare providers, researchers from 7 different areas within the United States started the association. So did it start out nationwide? Kind of, sort of, but not really. It was in 7 different areas. He was in the Chicago area. That's where our headquarters has remained. But we have grown we have chapters in every state. We have 60 or so chapters nationwide. And why it's not 50 on the nose is because, states like Texas, California, Florida have multiple chapters. So
yeah, bigger states, higher density population.
Exactly.
So, as you're saying, some of these states have more than one chapter. Let's get into the weeds and talk about a local chapter. What does a local chapter do? What's the purpose of the chapter?
Right. So really, the local chapter is to bring our vision, which is a world without Alzheimer's or any other dementia, kind of bring that vision to life, be the boots on the ground, to, organize those support groups, to do community engagement, to find advocates who are willing to go to Washington, D.C., go to Olympia, write those letters to the editor, write their Congress people, come. We just recently did a rally to talk about drug coverage that Medicare is sort of putting some roadblocks with, to do community education, to do walks, which we're going to talk about later.
Okay. And can you tell us about underneath the chapters? I know you have care and support programs. So let's talk a little bit about those programs themselves, because I know specifically for the Washington chapter, it's robust, the list of all the support programs that not only, take place through webinars and in person, but, then you even have like memory care cafes and so.
Yeah, we're really lucky in Washington where we have, we've kind of bounced back from the pandemic, and we have support groups meeting in person again. We have some that are still hybrid. So like you said, we have some, we call them memory cafes. Those are oftentimes at libraries, community centers, senior centers, where people that are living with the disease, either early in the stages or even sometimes later in the stages of the disease and the journey, can go with their caregiver and really just have that community, that sharing time, very much like a support group, but more of a social sharing. Then we have the traditional support groups. We have some that are for people who, were not sort of a generation, whether it's boomers or Xers, that live where we grew up, right? So we have support groups for people who are caring for their parents from afar. We have early stage memory loss support groups for those people that people are getting diagnosed sooner, so that are still like, potentially working, that are still trying to make those plans. Like, what am I going to do am I going to retire now? Am I going to stay working? What am I going to do with my healthcare directives? Those kinds of supports. We also work very closely with, and I hope I don't forget a healthcare system, but we work with Providence, Swedish, Multicare, and University of Washington to take referrals from them, especially for the newly diagnosed, and do care consultations and care coordinations to help people kind of, get on, do some planning and find some footing and find some support when they're early in their diagnosis. And then we do a lot of community education work. So one of our most popular talks is the 10 warning signs that our community outreach folks do. They do talks on finance. They do talks on difficult conversations and how to handle those. Do you need to take the car keys away from mom or dad? That kind of thing.
And I believe you also do talks on how to communicate
Yes.
with somebody with memory loss, and how to agree with them on things. I mean, if they say that
Exactly.
today's 1950 and they're remembering, living in their neighborhood in Brooklyn or whatever, then sure. What's the
Yep.
harm to, to agree with them on that? And yeah, just make it.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone thinks it's Christmas in July, it's Christmas in July. One of my favorite resources that we have, that our care and support team, and this isn't actually it, but it's shaped like a business card.
Mhm.
And when you're out and about with your loved one with dementia, is you can hand it to, say you're at a restaurant and you're with, wait staff, or, at a grocery store. It can be like, I'm, my loved one, or I forget exactly what it says, has dementia. Please be patient with us.
I've seen that card before, and somebody told me, they would slip it to the server in a restaurant, and it just eases everybody on, yeah, just something that's simple is so clever.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Alzheimer's Association and your and it being a volunteer healthcare association. What does that mean?
Right. So going back to when we were founded in, 1980 by Mr. Stone, those were volunteers. And while we do have staff in the Washington State chapter, in every chapter, really, we can't do all these support groups and all this community education and advocacy work without those volunteers. So of our 75 or so support groups, those are all volunteer led. In general, we have about 500 volunteers just within the Washington State chapter going out and doing those. You mentioned, communication talks, doing 10 warning sign talks. We also have people that, go to and again, we're going to talk about walk a little bit later, go to walk and help with, registration or making sure teams find each other. There's just lots of ways, I think, because people have a passion for this cause, that they get involved.
I did a event in April called The Road Ahead, and the Alzheimer's Association was there. So one of your volunteers, came and manned a table so that people could come up and ask questions. And she had written material to give out to for them to leave with. And so, there's a plethora of volunteer opportunities that we probably haven't even touched on, but that was the meat and potatoes of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we've mentioned walk. So let's talk more about walk. Why and when was the Alzheimer's walk started?
So the walk started back in 1989,
Hmm.
and it was at that point called the Alzheimer's Association Memory Walk. And I think a lot of people in Washington probably, if you've been kind of affiliated with the organization for any amount of time, remember it as the Memory Walk. And it's twofold, it's a fundraiser, but it's also very much about raising concern and awareness regarding the disease. It's a safe place for people to go and have that community, unless you've walked down this road with someone either personally, or a lot of people that participate in the walk have some type of professional connection. It's very difficult, and it's, just heartwarming and inspiring to be with people who kind of have that shared connection.
Yeah, I did go to one, well, more than one, but I took my father to one. My mother passed away from Alzheimer's, and it gives you that opportunity to know that you're not alone, that this didn't just happen to you or to just your family, that, you know, there are unfortunately many other families that are going through the same thing, but then you get to have a conversation with another family and you learn from them. Maybe you were struggling with trying to figure out how to get your wife out of bed in the morning, you know, and somebody could say, "Oh, we have that same problem too. This is what we tried and it's been so successful." So it gives you that instant support in that couple of hours that you were there, and you could walk away with so much, and your heart gets lifted a little bit
Yeah,
from it's
exactly.
yeah. I love the walks. They really are, and you hear stories and yeah.
Yeah, it breaks down walls. There still is, unfortunately, a lot of stigma around the disease. I mean, it is a neurodegenerative disease. There's nothing really anyone can do to prevent it. Yes, there are studies going on to look at, maybe are there some lifestyle things that could impact, but nobody really knows yet for sure. What we do know is what's good for the heart is probably good for the brain. But other than that, there's nothing definitive. And I think people are scared. They don't want to. If I have dementia, or I think this is happening, I'm automatically gonna, they're gonna take away my car keys. I'm gonna have to quit my, like, all these horrible things are gonna happen. And the walk is great for sort of level setting and like you said, kind of giving
And
hope.
and what's great about the walk too, and the education programs that are provided and everything, is that I think in the past our mindset was Alzheimer's is a disease for the elderly. Somebody beyond 70 and 80, you get it when, it's towards your very end of life. But unfortunately, there are people being diagnosed with the disease now in their 50s
Oh yeah.
or even earlier, and that's heartbreaking. So with the walk being able to raise funds to support research and learning how there might be things we could do healthcare wise for ourselves to prevent that maybe in our future, and getting checks with your doctor, etc. Anything helps. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
so we have walks coming up.
We
When
do.
Yeah, so when do the Alzheimer's walk take place? And let's talk about the local Washington walks first, and then I'm assuming there are similar walks around the country.
There are. So the walk is, as we call it at the association, just the walk, but the walk to end Alzheimer's, it really is the largest fundraiser um, in the States, maybe even globally. I don't know if I have the stat for that, but let's just pretend it's true for now, right now, for care support and research. It's huge. There are thousands of people that come out for walks. So locally, we do walks. Obviously, Seattle, Spokane, Portland, our major metros, but something that's very important to the association is being in community. So along with kind of being in major metros, we're going to be in Sequim, we're going to be in Silverdale, we're in Wenatchee, we're in Longview, we're in Mount Vernon, we're in Bellingham, because, dementia and Alzheimer's is everywhere.
Right. It's
And
not just located in urban communities and in
exactly.
the capitals of each state.
Exactly. So kind of looking, at the peninsula area, we have the swim walk is going to be on, and I have to look at my cheat sheet really quick, September 23rd, starting at 10 o'clock at Carrie Blake Park. And then our Silverdale walk is October 7th, also a 10 a.m. start, and it's at Waterfront Park.
And these walks are traditionally, those dates are Saturdays.
Yes.
And the registration starts and people gather. They can visit with different vendor booths there that might have some wonderful support material for them, whether it's for, financial advice, legal advice, nutrition, activities, whatever the case may be. But then there's also a ceremony that takes place with the flowers. So
Yeah, that's incredibly moving. Usually it's someone who is living with the disease that's there, someone who has lost someone to the disease, someone who is, perhaps impacted in another way. And they all share, just kind of maybe a 2-minute sort of talk about where they're at with this. And it's definitely powerful.
So if somebody wants to know where a walk is in their community, they should just go to www.alz.org, I'm assuming.
Yep. And they will be able to click on your chapter, and then you'll be able to find the walks. And walk season starts in some states. It will begin in August and it will run through November. I think our Florida and California folks go through November. Here in Washington, we wrap up in October, just to be on the safe side. And those walks are rain or shine. So
Yep. Well, I have just a couple of more questions, but we're running out of time, so I want to make sure I get these questions in for you. As we talked about, the Alzheimer's Association is a big volunteer program. So how can someone get involved in the walk from a volunteer standpoint or for personal reasons?
So when you go and you look for your local community walk, and forgive me, but you're going to have to scroll just a tiny bit on that page, and every walk has a manager. So reach out to that manager, their email's there, their phone's there, reach out to them about volunteer opportunities. I would say businesses, start a team, because I mentioned earlier, there's 300,000 unpaid caregivers in the state. Those are your employees that are probably missing time off of work or having their own stressors because they're a caregiver. So, that's not necessarily volunteering, but, starting a team is a way to get involved. Volunteers, there's all sorts of jobs at the walk. We definitely need young, or maybe not even young, but just, folks that don't mind putting up tents and lifting things around. It's always been a great volunteer opportunity for like high school students or youth groups. But we also need people that will just stand there and sort of direct traffic. And make phone calls sometimes to just remind people that the walk's coming up. There's all sorts of different ways.
And when you're saying start a team, I just want to make sure everybody understands. You could start a team, because I've done this many times, and it's about getting donations, right? You start a team, people can donate $25, whatever the case may be, set yourself a goal, but your team members need to understand, what, if you can't walk that day, that's okay. But the purpose of the team is to show the financial support. So if you can just understand that starting a team doesn't mean that you need to show up and swim on, in September or in Silverdale in October, but the support is needed for the teams. So
yeah, and I think the goal, and just quickly, there is a financial goal. We do realize it's a community event. So yes, we'd love that every team would raise $1 million, but they're not. It's a community event. So you can set your goal for your team at $100 and everybody pitches in 10. So, we want to meet people where they're at. So yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. If everybody gave $1 in the country, I mean, that would be amazing. So
Yeah, a lot of our healthcare issues would be solved. That's another podcast, right?
yep. So let's make sure we get some information to our listeners. What website and phone number do you want to share with our listeners so they can get information, whether it be for support, whether it's for 24/7 calling, educational materials, volunteering opportunities, starting a walk, etc. Where would you like to send them to?
You said it earlier, alz.org is the best place to find out when there are support groups, when there are education events, when those walks are, and how to volunteer for those walks or other things. We also have a 24/7, 365, 800 number that's staffed by master's level clinicians. And that's a great spot when it's, 2 a.m. and you're worrying and you just need somebody to talk to. And that is 800-272-3900. And if you go to alz.org, it's in big bold letters on the website as well.
And so that 800 number is nationwide, or is that a Washington 800 number?
It is nationwide, and it's staffed by master's level clinicians, so not by volunteers, but yeah. Because usually they need that extra, typically, people are calling and needing that extra level of support that maybe a volunteer isn't comfortable or able to give.
Yep. So no matter where you are, that number works for you. So
Yes.
well, we're going to have to say goodbye to our listeners. And I have to thank you, Nicci, for speaking with me today about the Alzheimer's Association and the walk. Like I said, unfortunately, nowadays, it's very common to be speaking with someone and they tell you someone close to them has Alzheimer's disease. I feel like it's 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon, if you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely.
But the Alzheimer's Association does provide so much support to our community, and I truly appreciate you sharing all of what is available out there for our listeners. So thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, grateful to be here. So thank you.
Well, until next week, folks, take care and thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.